Hello, welcome to Pecan Corner. I'm Tina, and today we're going to make pumpernickel bread. But not just any kind of pumpernickel bread. We're going to make gluten-free, paleo-friendly pumpernickel rolls that taste like real bread and don't have a bunch of crap in them. I'll be right back. Alrighty. I have to apologize to my dear friends and customers back when I was making baked goods for the farmers market before our farmers market this year closed, so we don't have one anymore, so I'm not baking anymore. But back then people kept asking me for gluten-free stuff, and I tried to find gluten-free recipes, and they were all awful, and they had things like xanthan gum and you know, seaweed gunk in them, and they didn't taste that good anyway, and so I didn't make them for them. Now that we're doing this paleo thing, I'm discovering there's all kinds of fabulous bread recipes out there that really taste like real bread and are simple, beautiful, natural, simple ingredients. So I folded up my butter parchment here, and I'll stick it in the fridge and freezer, and then I'll use it to grease my pans one day. I have preheated my oven to, well, I'm working on preheating it to 350 degrees. And now then, I've got a stick of butter in my, okay, I've got a stick of butter in here in my bowl, and I'm going to soften that and cream it. And then to that I'm going to add 6 eggs, a cup and a half of almond flour, and then we're going to go from there. Alrighty, now then, start with a half a cup, and this is blanched almond flour. I bought it on Amazon because that was but you can probably find it in your local stores. And the thing I like about the almond flour, you know, I'm kind of starting to get a little bit accustomed to cooking with coconut flours or almond flours. I like the almond flour because I'm really kind of a locavore at heart. I prefer eating foods that at least theoretically could grow in my area. I think it's really important as preppers that we get accustomed to eating a diet that, while it's adventurous and we enjoy supplementing with foods from far away, that our staples are all things that we could grow ourselves. And almond trees will grow here. Nut trees will grow just about anywhere. So while I use the cashew flour on this paleo diet, the reality is that pecan flour or almond flour, even, you know, walnut flour, just wherever your acorn flour, wherever you are, is going to be pretty. Okay, now I'm going to start adding these eggs in, sloshing them everywhere. Kind of have a little bit of the dropsy today, I guess. I'll have to go over all of that with bleach when I'm done, because I don't want the egg. These are not farm eggs, these are store-bought eggs that we had to buy because our friends who raise hens, I guess all their eggs are not, all their hens are not really laying a lot lately. No. Stopped by Deborah's house yesterday, day before yesterday, and she only had one lonely egg laying on the counter there. And usually she'll have a big old bunch of them that time of year. I'm going to finish mixing these eggs in, and then I'll be right back. Okay. Now then, now I'm going to add a teaspoon of salt. If you are not doing salt for some reason, you can reduce or even eliminate the salt. It will not impact the way the recipe rises. It will impact the flavor we're pretty big salt users, so I'm going to add salt to this. I finally gave up on my dumb sea salt container that was constantly full of moisture and didn't have a big enough hole to let out the salt. So I moved it into my empty sugar container here. And so, okay. Now then, let me get that. All right. And now, since this recipe makes 6 nice-sized, full-size rolls. They're just perfect size for a, with using my rings, they're perfect size for a hamburger. But we're going to have pulled pork tonight, so I want some plain rolls. But then I want these pumpernickel rolls for tomorrow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide my dough in half, my batter in half, before I add the baking powder. To finish this off, it'll have baking powder, but I don't want my baking powder reacting just yet. So I'm going to divide this, put half of that dough aside, and there we go. And then when I go to put my baking powder in, I'll add half of it to that. Now I'm going to start. I'm going to give you measurements for as though you were making the full recipe for the pumpernickel bread, and so I, don't get confused if you don't see me doing this. But I'll put the recipe down below. All right, I'm going to use molasses. We can have molasses on paleo diet. Molasses is just in the process of squeezing the juice out of sugar cane or sorghum. In a part of the process, you end up with molasses. It's kind of a natural. Blackstrap molasses is the most natural product. It's not very sweet, but it's got a huge amount of, it's got 500 milligrams of potassium in 1 tablespoon. It's only got 11 grams of carbs in a tablespoon. It's got 15% of the calcium, 20% of the iron, 10% of the magnesium that you need every day. It's got trace minerals like crazy. It's got things in it that nothing else has, and so it's a super healthy thing for us. I'm only going to use a teaspoon, which would be half a teaspoon in this one, a full teaspoon in the other one. Okay, and that's partly for flavor and partly for color. And I'm also going to use half a teaspoon of unsweetened cocoa powder. This is not cocoa like you make your drinks with. This is plain baking cocoa powder, which you can make chocolate milk with, but you have to kind of go through a little process because it doesn't like to mix with liquids very well. So you're going to have to mix it with hot water first, and then make a syrup that you can add to your milk to make chocolate milk. So I'm using half a teaspoon of cocoa. And we don't drink instant coffee, but we had a friend that needed decaf, and so I bought these little containers of instant decaf to keep on hand for him. And so it's got these little Folgers coffee crystals in it. So I'm only going to use part of this, and so I'm going to tape it back up when I'm done. You really want very little of this. Maybe 1/8 of a teaspoon. Let's call this let's say 1/4 of a teaspoon for your full recipe. Up and then see how dark it looks to you, and if it looks dark, if your batter looks dark enough to you. If it doesn't, we'll add a little bit more. We're kind of playing it by ear here as I this is one of those recipes I'm kind of making up as I go along. I know that the rolls are good, but I want this, see, it's not very dark at all. So I'm going to go ahead and add, so in our recipe we'll use a half a teaspoon of the instant coffee. There we go. And we'll use a whole teaspoon of the chocolate of the cocoa. There we go. It's not going to be sweet. There's no sweetness at all to this. There we go. Now then, it's pretty dark, and I'm going to, I don't want it to be bitter, so I'm not going to add any more to it this time. I'll let you know after we make it here whether it's, whether we decide that you need more for it. Okay, but I'm going to be really generous with the caraway seed because I like a lot of it in there, and I think that's what really gives it the flavor. So I would use a, in the full recipe I'd use a full teaspoon. Actually I'd use 2 teaspoons. There we go. And here, a little bit of onion powder. Just a small amount. This is for flavor, so I want to half a teaspoon of that in the full recipe. Okay, now I'm ready to make my to mix up my baking powder in it, you know, and now let me bring this around and I'll show you how I prepared my pans. Okay, when I baked these before, I found I've got these rings, and I used them, and I also have these nice big cans that I took the bottom out of. I thought originally these were from pineapple rings, but they're not. This is from pineapple rings. This might have been like, I don't know, beef stew or something that I don't buy, so I can't remember what these were in. I actually like these cans better. The inside is very smooth, whereas my rings have a little lip inside of them. But anyway, you want to, I'm recording, on the rings, you want to oil them a little bit, just a little bit of coconut oil. And then what I've done, I found that they all rose up just fine no matter what size ring they were in, but it was kind of hard to get them out of these little flat rings because they overlap. So what I've done is I've made me some little collars out of parchment, and all you do is you just take strips of parchment, and you can use a little piece of tape to hold it together and fit it right inside the ring there. And so that's what I've done. Now then, okay, here we go. Now I need a 2 teaspoons, which would be a full teaspoon in each bowl. There we go. Baking powder, not baking soda, but baking. I hate it when my camera's. There we go. Well, I've kind of got you zoomed in where you can see what's going on, but it makes it a little bit of a challenge for me to know what the camera's filming. Okay, Now then, I'm going to put a third of this into each of these. Kind of spread it out a little bit. Make sure it fills up the whole ring. There we go. Kind of make the top a little bit smooth. Okay. And now the next batch, these are just the plain ones. And don't tell Paul I said this, but this makes a killer substitute. The plain ones make a killer substitute for cornbread too. So he insists. He says, but there are other recipes for cornbread subs. And I'm like, yeah, but this tastes a lot like cornbread to me. So I'll make a genuine cornbread substitute one of these days too. But in the meantime, this one works very nicely, I think. Okay, now let's spread that one around. There we go. Now I'm going to pop these in the oven for 20 minutes and then I'll be back. Okay, my timer's going off. Let me pull these out. Let's see where we are. They're not done yet. Okay, we're going to give them, I've got something else in the oven, so I'm going to give them a little bit longer. And I'll be back. Okay, well, as a result of having something else in the oven with it, they didn't rise up as high as they could have. But my collars did a good job. It kept them from, there we go. I'm going to let those cool before I move them out, and I'll be back.